can open the floor to comments and discussion questions. Duncan Hay, and then Linda Godfrey.
Yancy, greetings, colleagues. Great to be here. I just want to build on, at a strategic level, build on what Johan and both Sibongosini have been alluding to. It was only at during these presentations, these responses, that I heard any reference really to skills development, learning, and education. And I would suggest to the Commission that this needs to be centrally situated in the framework, because it has huge consequences for the education and skills sector, what we're talking about now. So that's simply my suggestion, and I come in being hauled out very happily out of active retirement as acting director of Green Matter, and a sort of surrogate spokesperson for the green educational sector. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Duncan. Linda Godfrey.
Thanks very much, Yancy. I just have a question for Crispian or Brian or maybe someone else, not sure, before I have to duck off. And it was really in terms of kind of what I was expecting to find in the framework and sort of what I didn't find. And I'd like to get a sense in terms of, am I looking for something prematurely and is it still coming? Is that, you know, if we're going to achieve our climate commitments, if we're going to get to net zero, we're going to require disruption, major disruption, and we're going to require it soon. And disruption can be incredibly scary if you don't know what you're changing to. And that changing to was what I was missing in the framework. And I get a sense, you know, we're talking about a just transition, but are we clear in terms of what we are moving towards? And certainly the discussion this morning, and I think sort of my level of frustration is that I almost get a sense we're like a high pressure hose in that we're all over the place. We're trying to do lots of different things and there are lots of different initiatives. But the result is that all of those different initiatives are not giving us the scale of impact in the time frame that we need it. We've got really good evidence in terms of where our biggest climate impacts are. And I suspect that there are probably, I don't know, 5 big things that we could do in South Africa right now that would give us the scale and the impact that we need. And that we could have a very clear roadmap with very clear targets that says we need to transition our energy system from X to Z. We need to transition our mobility system from A to B. We need to do this in our agricultural sector to create resilience. This is what we need to do to reimagine our automotive industry. And in the discussions that I've had with people from various provinces, for example, around the opportunity of a circular economy, they seem to be struggling in terms of reimagining what their future looks like. And so my question to the Presidential Climate Commission is, are we going to get that envisaged future? Because there needs to be discussion and agreement around that, of where do we want to go to, and what does our new world in South Africa look like? And then practically, what do we need to do now so that we can filter out all of the noise and all of the other activity and get down to business in doing those 5 big things? Thanks very much, Yancy.
Thank you very much, Linda, for your informed opinion. Anyone else? Can I go to the chat?
Yancy, would you like me to reply to Linda's question?
Yes, please, Crispin.
Because I think it's very relevant, and maybe to share with you, you know, in writing this document, we were really grappling with questions around scope. And we ended up choosing to focus in particular on the measures needed to ensure that the transition is just, rather than to talk broadly about the mitigation and adaptation measures that are obviously an integral part of the transition. So, you know, we don't deal with the energy transition, the energy mix, the carbon budgeting process and how to sequence that. That's almost taken as read in this document. So I agree, it does give you a slightly frustrating sense that those big questions are avoided. What we did want was a really focused document that everyone could, you know, quite easily digest and engage. And, you know, the big change that's sort of captured by this document is trying to bring national development issues around human resources, access to services, support to workers, bring that into discussion with what's already a very mature climate policy discussion. I mean, we have an excellent low emissions development strategy, a national adaptation strategy. We haven't repeated those in this document. They're in a sense taken as read. But, you know, I'd certainly welcome your comments. I mean, I'm hearing that it creates a sense that we're now not prioritizing those areas, and that is incorrect. So any suggestions about how to improve it would be very welcome.
Thank you, Crispian.
Sorry, Janci, could I just give a follow-up? Sorry, I don't want to start a whole narrative here, but Crispian, thanks for that. And I think, you know, probably my frustration is that it's difficult to talk about a just transition if you don't know where you're going. I mean, we can talk about it very philosophically and theoretically, but if you're going to be engaging with the people in the Eastern Cape, in the automotive industry around a just transition, surely you have to be painting a picture of what that future looks like so that you take the fear out of the transition, so that they can get excited about, okay, fine, we've got 10 years of creating internal combustion engine vehicles, so we're going to be moving to this, whether this be producing EVs or whether this be creating an entirely new remanufacturing industry or whatever it is. And then we can say, okay, fine, to get you from A to B, we're going to have to upskill you very quickly in remanufacturing skills or in EV skills or in public transport skills, I don't know, something. Because then they can see their future and then they buy into the journey that you're taking them on. And that's, for me, I think, just as a South African, I don't have clarity in terms of where we're going as a country to achieve net zero and to achieve impact quickly. And so it's just kind of the shotgun approach. But maybe it's just because I'm out of the loop and, you know, all of these things are in fact happening and I don't need to be fearful of our future. Thanks.
Crispian, do you want to respond again?
No, look, I take the point well. So we, you know, there was a very thorough National Planning Commission process that was run as almost a prelude to the commission coming into operation and doing its work. So they went through a very detailed visioning exercise, and then they honed in on a couple of particular, what they call pathways, on the energy system, water, land, food security. I mean, those visions are, we didn't want to try and redo that visioning process. I mean, I do think they suffer a little bit from trying to be everything to anyone. So they're a little bit motherhood and apple pie-ish. Not that there's anything good, bad about motherhood, but we've sort of left those visions as they are. I mean, I will acknowledge that we need to put a more coherent vision on the table. and one that looks very specifically at what a renewable dominant energy system in this country looks like, what a transition for the auto sector looks like, what a transition for the agricultural sector linked to a much more precarious and water scarce future looks like. So I've taken those points. I don't think I'm not arguing with you about them.
Thank you very much, Crispian and Linda, for raising those points. Desika Naidu.
Yes, I thought I might weigh in on this just a little bit, because I think it's reflecting something that is missing in the environment. Because what we're encountering, and the PCC is an interesting organization in an interesting position, because it's managing to link very different parts of the system that haven't been well enough linked before. Is on the one side, you get the planners, whether the planners are in the National Planning Commission or individual government departments, or groups of entities that have been working for a very long time in developing strategies and plans and policies in this domain, but really grumbling about people not grasping that sufficiently and getting enough momentum around implementation. And on the other side is what Linda is expressing, that a very large group of people who are, as you are, high-level decision makers in your individual sectors, not knowing that that actually exists. So one of the things that we're trying to do as a commission, over and above the content, is creating those bridges in a much smarter way. And I want to put out to you that one of the specific reasons we've engaged the NSTF is because we're looking for those kinds of institutions and umbrella organizations that do manage to bring lots of different kinds of people together across that value chain in order to do exactly this. The issue about plotting out what the ideal future is highly controversial. And this is something that Linda, you will know quite well, that people have very different views of the future depending on where they are in the present. And that inequality is reflected in all of the IPCC reports. So depending on where you are, your futures are actually different. It is absolutely critical, Linda's right, that we manage to organize ourselves around a reasonably converged vision of that future. So we'd like to think about this as an accelerator part of a process that we know that needs to happen. And hopefully the PCC will manage to bring many more players together around converging that narrative, because we have to get there. And as the IPCC reports are telling us and reminding us repeatedly, we have to get there very, very soon. Thank you, Yancy.
Thank you, Desika. Right, in our chat, Mpole asked Brian Montana, risks inherent in Mpumalanga and in Limpopo on energy transition are based on the shift from coal to a new source. You have to replace the same source with a like source. For example, coal is the baseload power source. Relevant, no, I've lost it. So sorry, it jumped. I'm so sorry, I don't seem to be able to scroll down.
Shall I help read it out for you, Yancy? I've got it in front of me.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so Paul's question talks about those highly dependent energy regions of the country, like Mpumalanga and Limpopo, and talking about the shift from coal to a new source and what the implications would be, and then goes on to talk about, and I'm paraphrasing, what energy security really needs for it to be successful. And he's talking about baseload power as one of the major considerations, and the options of hydro, small nuclear, modular reactor technologies not being viable in some of those environments, and then goes on to talk about upskilling of the workforce being required, and then goes on further talking about the need for optimization and efficiency in all of the sectors that currently use energy sources, because higher efficiency would result both in transition ease as well as energy security. That's the gist of it.
Thank you, Desigan. He also mentions hydro and nuclear small modular reactor technologies. And yes, was something that we haven't talked about yet. So could you please address that, Brian Montlaner?
Hey, Yancy. Thanks. Before talking to Dr. Lekgoti's points, I want to thank Linda specifically for her input. I like the framing of her input. I note that both Desigan and Crispian have responded to you, Linda. However, I want to remind you that our intent here is less of responding, more of listening. So I was happy to hear the way you framed your question of we changing to what. And my sense is that there are various shades of that answer from different people, and that those shades will be informed either by personal convictions or by personal understanding of the landscape, of the various landscapes, or by various interest groups that they represent. But your question is very pointed and pertinent, and I'm noting it down as one of the key takeaways from these conversations. And thanks to all that have made inputs. Dr. Lekgoti, you mentioned a number of things here. Thankfully, you also identify issues like opportunities, building on some of the points that we've heard, for instance, from Duncan Hay, on upskilling of the existing workforce, on focusing on education. So yes, on those opportunities, the question is less of what, when it comes to that notion of upskilling and education, is about how. How do we build on existing initiatives? How does this work complement existing initiatives? How do we bring in relevant role players to scale up what they are already doing? What support do they need? What support can come from this kind of work? So yes, thanks colleagues. Keep dropping those views. We're noting each one of them. It's precisely what we are here for. The issue of baseload, Dr. Mpo, we can talk till cows come home. That's what we say in my home language. Again, I'm not going to respond to it. Is renewable energy sufficient to provide the baseload required to drive a national economy? Where have we seen that happening in the world? And if you ask 10 people, you'll get 14 different answers. I'm not going to give you mine. All I'm saying is, yes, it's a key question, the issue of baseload. And it's a real question, because how energy is needed to drive our lives, our economy, our livelihoods. So my attempt is definitely not to answer what you are asking, but to indicate to you that because the reason is because if I do answer, I'll give you my view as Brian Mantlana, and perhaps reflecting my constituency and my intellectual understanding, which is not complete. But I'm glad that you are raising these issues, and I'm inviting other colleagues to do the same. Thanks, Yancy.
Thank you, Brian. Going back to the chat.
There is a hand from Azwi.
Okay, let's take Azwi first.
Thank you, Yancy. I just want to add another thought that I think didn't feature prominently on the framework. We are a very interesting country, and some of the initiatives can really be low-hanging fruits. If you are to remember the drought of, I think it was year before last, where the Western Cape was very much affected, and there was water scarcity. There was a big change, behavioral change, and appreciation in terms of the importance of water. And people were using the minimum required to survive. And that has changed things drastically. And some of those habits are still kept. And it has changed quite a lot in terms of our water footprint. So if you look at how we use resources generally in South Africa, if you have infinite money, you can use as much as you can of that resource. Even if it's not for any benefit, I can just leave my TV on at home and go to work because I have infinite money. And somebody who doesn't have money, they will adhere to the rules. They will use the minimum required. So I think as we think about this, there's a low-hanging fruit in terms of efficiency. In the area of agriculture, there's a lot of what we produce that we don't eat because it's lost somewhere in the value chain. So, and there's cost to getting these efficiencies, but it's cheaper than other options. So I think this is something that can appeal a lot, especially to both the people in the lower level and those in the higher level to say, do you know how much you need? I mean, until I have a bucket in my shower in the Cape, I didn't know how much money I used to shower. So I think this is some of the paradigms that we need to be thinking about. So I thought I need to put this on the table.
Thank you very much, Norman. Right. Let me go back to the chat. Linda Godfrey said, thanks, Brian. Yes, uncertain or controversial futures comes with vested interests in the status quo, not from scientific uncertainty. I think by now we know exactly what needs to be done to mitigate our climate impacts as a country. Doing the status quo, I've missed it again, I'm sorry. Please read Linda's comments in the chat. I'm going to look for questions. Adam Skoradi says, a vision needs to be picturesque so that people can imagine that and be inspired by it. Consider M.L. King's I Have a Dream, where the children of slaves and the children of slave owners will sit around the same table. The technical policy documents need to be supplemented by compelling metaphors. And Gordon Branson says, thank you for an enlightening and informative summary review of the challenges ahead. It is very evident that the reimagining process is critical to the planning and implementation for the future. I can share a strategic development approach, which is nested within the framework for strategic sustainable development. This is in response to the question on envisioning a just transition for proposed consultation using a robust and exceptionally well-researched framework. There is that public on ResearchGate. Important also includes social sustainability. Elvis Fosso-Concau says, although it is relevant to improve the management of existing water resources to address water security, it's also important to bear in mind that one of the major problems of the country is physical water scarcity. It will be therefore important for the report to address prospects considering alternative water sources. Gordon Branson, would you like to elaborate on what you have posted in the chat?
Good afternoon. My name's, I think that's fairly obvious. I'm currently in Scotland. I'm a South Africa living and working abroad, and I'm quite honoured to be in the company of the esteemed scientific community in South Africa. And I pay tribute to all the work that's been done, and I've been watching closely as an observer rather. However, I have also undertaken a number of academic qualifications both in Sweden and in the UK. The one particular module that I covered was through Blekinge, the institute in Sweden, and they focus on strategic sustainable development. They do a leadership course, and I completed the module, and I was fascinated at the simplicity on the one hand, but also the ability to cover so many different aspects of society as well as within governments. And it's a strategic approach which I believe has the ability to not just simplify the process, but also get to the heart of the matter. And so the system approach, which I noted with interest, was highlighted in one of the speakers' presentations, and it spoke of the systems thinking approach. And this is critical to the reimagining process. And so I won't go into it, I won't elaborate, other than to say that I've put the links in the chat, hoping that those colleagues that are or do find this of interest and perhaps are new to the FF or the FSSD approach will review it as a proposed approach to better elaborate, especially at the community level, because what the FSSD does is it focuses in on the industrial aspect as well as the economy. And in many respects, the framework sees the difficulties that we find ourselves in, largely due to the social obstacles and the financial models or the constructs, which are really constructs that some would argue need to be deconstructed in some areas and some parts. Just to conclude, I would also focus your attention on the social aspects, the social sustainability aspects. This is cutting edge research that has come out very, very recently through one of the researchers who took this up as a critical key issue. And as we all know, the Scandinavian countries have not just talked the talk, they walk the walk, and they also provide substantial support to developing countries as well as nations that really are grasping the challenges. And the FSSD was born out of a professor at Blekinge University who is championing this particular approach with great success in Scandinavian countries. So I think I'll just end it there. But again, I'd just like to thank you for inviting a humble person like myself. I have the distinction of being an academic, completing my academics in South Africa, in environmental biotechnology. So I was particularly impressed with the blue-green economy approach. And I also still have very, very, very good friends and colleagues, and I continue to be of assistance and hope I can be of assistance in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Gordon Branson. Good to hear from you over there in Scotland. And I commiserate with you when you're missing South Africa. There's no country like here. And thank you for those insights. This is why we're having this discussion, is to bring people together from different perspectives. Any other comments? Anyone who posted in the chat and want to elaborate on what they are saying? No?
Yancy, can I please invite Elvis? He's talking about water, and I would like to listen to him further on this issue of water security.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Elvis?
Yes, Yancy. Good day, Yancy. Good day, colleagues. Yes, Brian. I read the report. Let me first starting by commending you for the effort put in that report. So I read the report and I noticed that you recommended in the section of water security to actually work in improving the management of existing water sources, which is actually good. But taking into consideration that our country is a dry country, which means when it comes to physical water, we don't have enough. If you think a little bit at what happened in 3 years, 4 years back, if you have that kind of situation where our dams are less than 50% full, doesn't matter how good your treatment process is, you still not have enough water to supply the demand. So it's time now also to think of alternative sources. The first speaker talked about thinking of treating ocean water, but you also have technology like atmospheric water harvesting, which is excessively used in the Middle East and in the Northern Africa. So it's important in your report also to try to consider a project or maybe some ideas around those alternative sources of water. I think we will benefit a lot if it happens that we don't have enough inland water available to supply the demand. That was my what I was trying to say in my comment. Thank you.
Brian, do you want to respond?
Perhaps Desigan is better placed than myself here. I'll just say, you know, one of the aspects that we are picking up in the inputs that we're getting from different colleagues is the issue of policy alignment, where you find that one area of work, one sector is calling for this issue, is focusing on this issue, and is doing so with minimum consultation with other wing that will be affected up or downstream. And water is often part of that victim of lack of policy alignment or coherent thinking across different sectors. That's why I invited Elvis to listen further to you. But Desigan has spent most of his time dealing with water, and perhaps you may want to talk to what Elvis is sharing with us.
Yes, Desigan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Elvis, for raising that. As we raised earlier, a different component of the water issue and water security, and that's around the behavior. Look, South Africa has been experimenting with a lot of these, and in the National Water and Sanitation Master Plan, as it is now called, it actually talks about a variety of taps. It's surface water, groundwater, other augmentations, including atmospheric water reclaiming, as well as reuse, recycling as a major input, with desalination as a special component of that. And of course, water behaviors, the demand management and water conservation. The key challenge that we have, and this is some of the impetus we want to put in from a climate perspective, is water wastage, less than optimized use of water, not only diminishes your water security, it also uses and wastes a lot of energy, and it has a very, very high carbon price associated with it. Now, we have unaccounted for water in this country now averaging 40% in our municipalities, which means we can only account for 60% of what leaves our treatment works. And there's huge wastage associated with that. There's the whole opportunity around revenue generation, and all of these need to be tightened up in an accelerated way. And the Water Master Plan points out how the minister wants to do it, and it's about all of us getting into that space. I think the additional thing that we would want to do now from a climate perspective is to put the carbon equation onto that, because that hasn't been emphasized enough before. I think we were hyper aware of the nature of the wastage. I think nobody in this part of the world has any illusions about how dry this country is. We don't have any illusions about the nature of the water inequality in our system, because the people in the suburbs, on average, use 5 times more water than people in the townships, who then, in turn, use about 5 times more than people in the rural domains. But the carbon equation into this, I think, will become a very important factor and a motivator for that change. Thank you, Yats.
Thank you, Desikan. Yes, important perspective. What I'm seeing is, or hearing, is that the food and waste nexus is where we've landed in terms of our discussion. And it's important to bear in mind the kind of intersections that there are among various sectors and how things are entwined. So you can't just bring about a change in the energy sector. It has linkages to other sectors, and one has to look, as Linda proposed, at the 5 things that can be done immediately, perhaps in various sectors, so that there is a transition of all those sectors and not just the energy sector. That's what I'm thinking. Right, would you like to ask any other questions, participants, or make any other comments? Just looking who's in the audience so that I can call on people. I'm not succeeding. Would anyone like to address the question of skills and education further? Johan Martin spoke about advanced skills that need to be taught, especially to young people. But what about the other skills that are where it is possible to transition from an unskilled working environment to a slightly more skilled sector, so that there can be, so the job losses can be minimized? Brian, would you like to comment on that?
I was tempted to do so, Janssen, but I wanted to bring in my boss here, Chippy, to comment on this, because it's a cross-cutting issue that is multifaceted. Temporarily, we should not be thinking about this issue of skills as a once-off issue. I think currently, not that I think, I know that currently it's a reality that we who are in the research and development sector are struggling with. We're struggling to attract the skills that we need to do the kind of research we want to do. Often we have to look outside the borders of South Africa to get the skills that we require. And so there seems to be a misalignment between what we are focusing on in the research areas with what is coming out from our universities. And I stand to be corrected here. I'm speaking purely from the research and development perspective, that I find that when we need the skills that we require to support the research and development agenda of South Africa, we often have to look outside of the country to get such skills, which is a tragedy. And it's not clear whether the national response is urgent and at the scale that is required. But my response, as you can hear, is limited to my own industry, if you like. Perhaps, Chippy, you want to take it broader? I do not know, but to me, there's a temporal issue here. When it comes to skills in South Africa, we're talking about, we are a country that lacks water. I'll go further and say, actually, we are a country that lacks skills equally to respond to most of the challenges that we face. Perhaps it's not the lack, the question is optimum use of the existing skills, one may argue. I don't want to be philosophical about it. I do not know. But the issue of skills is definitely a key aspect, key element of our thinking in this framework. Chippy?
Sure, Brian. I mean, I'm happy to add my penny's worth on the topic. So I guess we've got to start by saying we have a major problem in the skills development system. And, you know, that extends from our basic education system, our TVET colleges and our CETAs, and our higher education system. And parts of the system are chronically underfunded. Other parts have adequate funding. I mean, the skills development levy is a universally applied system, but it's being spent in an extremely inefficient way. So any solution to the future skills issue does have to look long and hard at the current diagnostic and how to take the system forward. And it could well be that, you know, in gearing up skills for the new climate economy, the green economy, we're going to need to radically depart from certain established policies and programs. Obviously, any kind of skills plan and set of interventions needs to be done in the context of what the future labor force looks like. So we're actually busy now with a fairly detailed exercise to understand what are the sectors that are going to grow and what are the sectors that are going to decline. and what does the labor force in those sectors look like, and consequently, what are the skills associated with that? So that's part of a detailed planning process that we're undertaking at the moment in partnership with a funder called Yellowwoods, who are linked to the Enthoven family and the Hollard enterprise. That's exciting work. I'm hoping it's going to be coming out with some concrete products before the end of the year. And clearly we want to link that into a lot of the funding discussions that are happening now. So, currently South Africa is awash with offers of funding from various international and local development partners. And what they're complaining about is that they're very keen to support the just transition, but there isn't an adequate pipeline of projects that they're able to invest in. So part of our attention is now shifting to how do we get that pipeline developed? And it's an area in which many of you, are, I think, very actively engaged. So I would welcome you, those of you that are wanting to intervene in the skills space, to coordinate with us, and let's see how we can build this pipeline going forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Crispin. That's very interesting. Johan Martens?
Oh, thank you very much. I would very much like to take up that offer, but before I do that, can I please share my screen?
Yes, go ahead.
Let me just share the right one. Now, the SIMC is short for Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Mechatronics and Control. And our responsibility lies with the Engineering Council of South Africa, addressing the requirements for, or looking after the interest of factory automation, process automation, mechatronic devices, etc. So we discussed with various education institutions what we could do to get the education in such a way that we can make sure that the products that education provides is a product that industry will buy, if I put it very crudely. And what happened then was that I'm just trying to get back my screen. Yeah, there it is. So what we did is the education institutions told us, listen, we can assist, but are you going to provide us money? Now, the SIMC is a non-profit company. We do not have vast amounts of resources, but we do have is industry suppliers like Yokogawa, Siemens, ABB, Beckhoff, and those guys who actually have a BEE spend that they have to in order to get the necessary points. So what we did is we went to them and said, how can we use those funds to get education to turn their programs in such a way that we as industry can get the products we need. After a lot of discussions, it came out that it was the ideal to provide or create a trust fund so that companies can put money into the trust fund, and then we use that trust fund to pay for Category A, which is the adult basic education and training programs, Category B, bursaries, Category D, the SAQUAs, programs, category E, unit standard programs, and category F, exhibitions, CPD, that's the continuous professional development. And then category C is where they, after they qualify, they need to go through 3 years of experience to obtain experience in 11 outcomes so that they can register as professional technicians, technologists, and engineers. And this trust fund is now in the final throes of setting this up, hoping to implement it as from the 1st of January next year. The basic idea is that we will talk to education institutions, and if they commit to working with us to slowly change their programs to what industry wants, we will provide them with bursaries so that the students can go and study at that particular institution. Currently, we've already have a couple of universities on board. The first one is Tshwane University of Technology that's working with us, and Nelson Mandela University and Northwest University is all committed to working with the SIMC. There are others as well that's in the pipeline, and there are, you still need to address TVET. So the basic idea is that we will work together with education and get them to change their curriculum to what we as industry want, because we know that disciplines like doctors are going to be very limited, and because the first medical doctor that passed medical exams is already as a robot. So the first one is already there, and we see that the next are coming. We see these trucks where people have gone on a huge stampede to chase the non-South Africans out because they want to drive the trucks, and within a few years there's not even going to be a steering wheel on that truck. So it's very important that we stop looking at the past and seriously look at how technology is moving and get our people educated in this. Now, just for on a lighter note, we were asked at one symposium whether we would get in an airplane if it doesn't have a pilot. So the one person stood up and said, you need 3 things to fly an airplane. The first is a pilot, a computer, and a dog. He said, now what do you need the dog for? He said, well, to bite the pilot if he touches anything. Thank you.
That's very interesting. Right, thank you, Johan. That is very exciting what you guys are busy with. And I think that that is the kind of initiative that we need to make the transition. Our training and learning institutions will be incredibly important. And I know that they are already struggling. They have been struggling for a very long time. And capacitating them is incredibly important, together with a change in curriculum.
Can I say?
Yes?
Can I say something? Yeah, it's quite,
yes.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting topic when we talk about skills. It's one of the critical problems in this country. I think when we talk about skill, we look at 2 aspects, orientation and resources. Okay, orientation, because we have to train according to the needs. So if we say everyone is going to do engineering, when maybe the demand in for engineer is not that high. So what will happen to the excess of people who have been training engineering? And that's dynamic, the demand. So the demand of this year, or maybe in 5 years from now, may not be the demand in the 10 years, the 5 other coming years after. So someone say, do a proper diagnostic. That's very important. But there's also another aspect here, is that the people we are receiving, the kids who arrive at the university, they already have sometimes a certain limitation for them to be able to do the choice, the choice that they want to actually to actually do what they want to do, to choose to work in a specific area and be accepted in that area, because our basic education system is already a problem. So it all starts there. So if in the basic education system, the kids are not properly trained, or if they don't receive the education in a specific subject that will eventually be needed when they arrive at the university to select a course, that's already a problem. You see that they will not be able to actually be in the pool that qualify to do a certain course. So we have to work on the basic education system to give the opportunity to kids to choose, or to be among those who will be chosen to fill the gap in the industry eventually. Now, talking about resources, we have been talking about transformation. One of the areas of transformation is agriculture, but the government have identified the gap and the need for transformation. But since the talk have been going on, how many agricultural universities have been built to train the potential farmers? Okay, don't just become farmer overnight. So these resources must be available to actually train the people that we need to fill the gap. Right? And one of the major problems in this country are the artisans. Just start there. You want the artisan in this country. There's a big need for artisan. But where are the institutions to train the artisan? You barely see them. So these are the aspects that people must actually look at to fill the gap when it comes to skill. That's my contribution. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Elvis, for raising those points. Indeed, we have to do that kind of thing. What I'm also gathering is that we're doing a lot of engineering training, but that trained engineers trained engineers are having difficulty doing their practicals and also to find work. So at the moment, those positions don't exist for engineers, but we absolutely need them for the future that we're going into and going into quite fast. So I think that there needs to be that kind of planning that takes into account what will happen to the people that are being trained correctly, and will they be able to transition from their studies to the workplace. Deepak Patel.
Yeah, thank you, Yancy. I've been listening to this skills and training debate very intently. I think at the most overarching level, we need to say that across our institutional framework and in fact our real institutional system, there has been failure. And I think it's useful to think of skills in the context of the transition that we want to undertake, so that we don't end up, for example, training theologians to run renewable energy operations. And the reason I'm saying this is that skills and training, as well as higher education, must be aligned to the trajectories that we choose. And the PCC is doing a lot of work to look at what the best decarbonization effect while getting the growth and employment imperatives for our country right look like in a reconciled way. Of course, there will be bottlenecks and barriers to successfully navigating such a transition. And one of the bottlenecks is in fact going to be skills availability, or the human resource or the human capital element of these trajectories. For me, I think it's very important as well to draw the linkages to technology and countries' technological readiness, to also participate in a value-adding, for want of a better word, localized way as we become, let's just say, as the system changes, whether we're talking about the energy system, whether we're talking about the petrochemical sector, whether we're talking about the manufacturing base changing, at the level of operating projects once implemented, there's a certain type of skill that is needed, and we call that operator skill. One step above that, in the actual production processes, on condition that those projects have been implemented, we would call that production management skills. And Elvis has made a very, very important point, and that is we are going to find a bottleneck even at the most basic level of operating and production management, maintenance, repair skills as we begin to shift value chains away from coal-based technologies to technologies that are different. And I'm at pains to point this out because allied to this is also a set of opportunities that come with technology transfer and localization of technologies, and therefore don't want to miss this opportunity to maybe make a very practical recommendation of the way in which the NSTF can engage with us on an ongoing basis so that this is not a one-off conversation, just consulting on the just transition framework, but in fact, an institutional linkage between ourselves and you to ensure that the skills technology nexus, as it relates to getting the most for domestic socioeconomic development and what that means. And I'm suggesting, for example, that the PCC wants to do not only a skills gap analysis and then feed into the national training and skills systems. We all know that there are a multitude of TVET colleges out there. Are they doing the right thing? Are they focusing on the right elements in a way that is aligned to trajectories as we see them unfolding? Secondly, is the quality of what they're teaching and therefore what they're producing as artisanal outputs sufficient, leave alone to meet the future demands that will be generated to even meet the existing demand for efficient operations. Secondly, on the technology side, we do intend in stages doing initially a technology diagnostic to look at what especially mitigation pathways will require in terms of technology to implement real projects that become operational. But within those value chains, there are sub-technology elements which I think, while we might not hold the IP for an integrated end-to-end solution in any particular sector, we can certainly begin to look at the kind of technology and manufacturing capability that might present itself to become part of overall value and supply chains. So we want to do a technology readiness diagnostic. We want to do on the back of that a technology gap analysis. And on the back of that, I think, or side by side with it, the skills analysis of what kind of skills are needed across the value chain, both vertically and horizontally. So I would like to propose, and maybe it's premature because the meeting is not yet come to an end, I would like to propose that we resolve out of this engagement a strong ongoing partnership between the NSTF and the PCC in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deepak. We are willing to do that, to have an ongoing engagement and to unpack some of these things, because these are very complex problems, and maybe to explore the intersections, how things fit together in a systems thinking way that can advise government on the overall way in which things fit together and not just looking at it sector by sector. Anyway, those are my preliminary thoughts. Sibongiseni, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Yancy. I think I've been provoked by Elvis's point and the one from Patel as well, but also linked to Crispian's offer, which is exactly what I'm rising on to say. We as a department, I think we will appreciate that offer, Crispian, because I think we are moving into an era where our agricultural colleges are now, I think, gonna be reporting under our minister. And the intention in the department is to make them centers of excellence in specializing them. So to respond to Elvis's point of saying, are we creating new, universities that specializes in the various aspects of agriculture value chain? We are in that transition ourselves internally here. So we also had an engagement with the National Skills Fund, to be able to look into, for instance, in agriculture, at a policy level and even at a standard level and the norm level, when we are ushering the 4IR into the sector, what disruptions will that have into the existing food system? And in a nutshell, also be able to prepare the future workforce in partnership with the universities, because we have got also MOUs with various universities. I was supposed to be in a meeting with some of the universities, and it had to be cancelled because of this one, which is beginning to look into the curricula, and preparing the curricula of the universities in partnership with the department, obviously through the bursary section that we have, but also at a bigger level to partner with the National Skills Fund to avail resources so that we could move into this trajectory. And I'm happy with this discussion today, because it will then begin to incorporate the transition into the green and blue economy in a nutshell, and be able to interface with the work that is being done in the presidency. And we'll appreciate as well, I think, Jansen, continuous engagement as Mr. Patel has proposed of the NSTF with the NPCC, so that we allow for that multi-stakeholder engagement and collaboration to exist. Because I think if one was sitting in your own corner as agriculture and be able to tackle these matters are issues of national interest, and they require multi-stakeholder collaboration. But I think the meeting today, I think it has opened up a lot of eyes in terms of potential areas for partnership, understanding where the country is intending to go. Yet we need to crystallize that direction. But I think one is much comforted, in terms of the direction that we are taking in the department in this very same move, accommodating climate change, because it affects us directly in the main. I don't want to deal with the issues of how our sector is being, structured. We've got more older people in the sector than young people. So I think those are all internal dynamics which our DG and our minister, they are dealing with. And I think through the partnership we're having with through the colleges of agriculture, it is our attempt as well to make the sector younger, so that we have got the future farmers of this country continue to produce food for our food system to be sustainable over time. Thanks, Jansen.
Thank you very much, Sibongiseni. And I'm very glad that Delrid is represented here today, and also the ARC.